Hello everyone. Today I am going to be briefly discussing the film Hotel Rwanda, and the reason why I put this film in particular in the underrated category, as you can see by the title, is that I feel that a lot of people don't really discuss this film that much, and I find aspects to this film rather unique than a lot of other films that do focus in on Africa. In case you don't know, Rwanda is in Africa, and it does seem to relate to a lot of the issues that people bring up in regards to Africa. And one of these particular instances throughout African history happens to be the Rwandan Genocide. So this particular film is basing itself off of a true story. Like, the characters in this film are, for the most part, fairly similar to the circumstances that ended up happening in real life. But as to how similar, I am not sure. But for the most part, they do emphasize the fact that they are trying to make a film that is based upon something that actually happened. So this occurred, I believe, in the 90s, the Rwandan Genocide. And this particular movie focuses in on the Hutu and Tutsi ethnic groups. And these two ethnic groups don't end up getting along, and this sort of leads to a chain of events that end up sort of causing the genocide to happen. And a hotel manager named Paul, and I want to get his last name right, Rusesis Abagina, ends up being sort of caught up in it, as well as his family. And what ends up resulting is a lot of people end up going to him to sort of escape the genocide that is happening. And also you'll see at one point soldiers who are sort of initiating this genocide actually come in contact with him as well. So really, there is a lot of tension in this movie. You really do feel for these characters, in particular the main character, Paul. You do get the sense that Paul is trying to keep it all together, despite the chaos that's going on. And it's really interesting, I think, to look at, because a lot of the times I've noticed that films tend to focus in more on other kinds of characters, like Leonardo DiCaprio in Blood Diamond, but this is a totally different approach, and I think this approach is done fairly well. The actor that plays Paul is Don Clidell, which I believe he was in Iron Man 3 as well, so he's a very well known, I think, actor. And there's also Nick Nolte in this movie, who ends up playing a Colonel Oliver, he's called, but basically he's supposed to be sort of a UN peacekeeper, and you'll see how his character sort of comes in, and how him and Paul are really sort of on the same side, but at the same time, Nick Nolte's character, you'll see, will have to sort of take a back seat because of the fact that he, as a UN peacekeeping officer, can't really do much. So you'll really see how that really sort of causes a lot of pain within the relationship, because it's not like that his character doesn't want to help Paul and everybody else that's surrounding him. It's more of the fact that he's not capable to do so. And you'll also see how this affects Paul's family, in particular, Tatiana Rusesa Abagina, who is played by Sophie, I want to get this last name right, Okonedo. And for the most part, you do feel a sense of genuineness from the characters for the most part. And what I found really unique about this film is that it is fairly graphic in nature. The violence is really present in this film, and it is sort of tragic seeing just these average citizens being sort of massacred, and you really get the sense of fear and panic that's surrounding this entire film, and how really Paul as a manager is supposed to keep it all together, keep the soldiers somehow happy while still protecting these refugees that are coming in. And you really see how it leads all to a really big breaking point, and then you'll kind of see where the plot diverges from there. But I don't really want to give too much away from the plot. But for the most part, I think that's really all you need to know going in. I think for the most part, I consider this film again to be underrated, because not a lot of people really talk about this film or really mention this film so much. It seems it is a little bit downplayed, and it'd be nice if more people could be exposed to it, because I think it is a really good film. It can be, I think, hard for people to watch, considering the fact that it is very graphic in nature, and the fact that it's not just like a war film. It's really portrayed as a genocide film, because it is really what ended up resulting from this conflict was a genocide. So you'll kind of see these circumstances that end up happening to Paul and his family. You'll see how what turns the war goes into, and you'll kind of establish a sense of how these kinds of issues were sort of dealt with during the time, even though the way maybe people dealt with certain things weren't really as productive or really actually ended up helping a lot of people. But you'll kind of see how this kind of journey that these characters go through is very compelling, and I think it says a lot if a film can really touch on these issues in a way that makes us feel the emotions with the characters, and make us sort of understand a little bit of the circumstances that were going on during this genocide, and who was involved, and what ended up resulting from the war, and so on and so forth. So for the most part, I think it does a good job of displaying that to the audience. I really wish I could say more about it, but I don't really want to give too much away. But all you need to really know going in is that it is a film focusing in on a very very controversial issue, which is genocide. But I think it presents itself in a way that is rather realistic and not sugar-coated in any way, shape, or form. And while at the same time giving us a sense of hope, and of how, despite such certain circumstances where there seems to be so much chaos, there's always somebody there who's willing to help and reach out. and make that kind of difference. And you'll see how Paul really ends up being one of those people. So really that's all I think I can say about it without giving too much away. But really that's all you need to know going into it. It's just a film that's trying to show you these kinds of circumstances and how these characters sort of get through those circumstances and what directions and turns they end up leading them to where they end up going. And you'll kind of see how this affects them really deeply and sort of changes their lives. So really it's trying to show you the power of people and how the political situations within Rwanda during this time period were rather complex and fairly chaotic. And even the film itself presents itself as fairly chaotic. The violence is pretty chaotic. The way Paul has to handle things is hard for him to do in an orderly fashion because of how everything is so messed up. So you'll really see that presented in the film, and it'll give you a clearer understanding of what this genocide was, and sort of the history, and at the same time the results from what ended up happening. But yeah, I think that's really all I can say about it. It's it's more of a, I think, a really more of a straightforward narrative, in that there are certain things within the plot that are interesting to touch on, but I feel like it would be spoiling it to do so. But all you really need to know going in is that there is this guy who actually lived, who was a manager of a hotel in Rwanda, and who had to go through the Rwandan genocide along with his family, and he sort of ended up helping some people along the way with his hotel, and at the same time trying to keep people at bay during this conflict. And you'll kind of see what direction it goes and what ends up happening to the characters, and you see the heartbreak, you see the joy, and you see all different kinds of emotions in there too. So I think it's a powerful film in that respect, and I think it's done really well. So I would definitely recommend it, and I feel like that as a film itself, it doesn't seem to be put on so much of a higher pedestal, unlike something like Schindler's List or other films that maybe touch on these kinds of subjects. So I definitely would recommend it, but I think that's really all I can say about it. It's fairly straightforward in what it's trying to say. But again, any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody, bye-bye, and thank you so much for watching.